Hello and welcome to British English with Joel and Lia.
Today's video is all about BBC English.
So sometimes referred to as RP English, Received Pronunciation, or BBC English, which is the way everyone used to speak on the BBC way back when.
So in this video, we're going to talk you through 3 features of BBC English.
In the second part of the video, we're going to explain that this is no longer really a common way of speaking in the UK or in London, but you can absolutely use these features if you're learning a BBC accent for perhaps an acting role or for just out of interest. And we're going to just talk a little bit about what people in the UK think about BBC English.
So here we go.
So the first feature of RP or BBC English is the U sound, such as the word duke or
During.
So in contemporary London English, we would probably say during or during, which is during.
Yeah. Or Duke.
Or Duke. The Duke of Edinburgh had a great time during his trip to London.
Which is perfectly fine, but it's not technically correct and not correct in the BBC English accent.
So we're taking away the J sound and we're just saying DU next to each other. During.
Duke.
So it might be really sort of hard to hear. Maybe you can't hear the difference, but certainly when you speak to someone who's very much old school RP, and you hear them say during. Duke.
And often these people are older, a lot older, and they will correct you. If they hear you say Duke, they'll say it's Duke.
Yeah, similarly, I had a teacher tell me it's tissue, not tissue. So, and the same with the word issue. Instead of, I said, what's your issue? So, you know, there's no correct way to say it. Both are acceptable. It's just that if you are trying to learn a BBC English accent for whatever reason, it's these tiny, tiny things that will make the difference.
The next one is to do with stress placement in words like cigarette.
So the correct way of saying cigarette in an RP accent would be cigarette, in the same way that you would say laundrette, not laundrette.
Yeah.
Cigarette, laundrette. It's cigarette, laundrette.
Mm-hmm. It's a very silly thing. It's a tiny, tiny thing. But again, if you want to do a BBC English accent, it should be cigarette, not cigarette. It's just stupid.
It's a really silly thing, and it's don't feel like you have to speak like this if you're learning British English. If you're learning British English, then you're in the right place, because our channel is actually about how people speak in 2017 that are sort of our age. If you're looking for a TV programme perhaps to help you with BBC English, I might recommend that you watch something like Mr. Selfridge, where most of the actors speak with BBC English, because it's set in Selfridge's, an English department store, back in when it opened, so ages ago.
Yeah, definitely. Or The Crown on Netflix, which is a series all about the royal family and when the Queen was younger. So, of course, they've all got BBC English accents, so it's a really good one as well.
Yeah. So the third example that we found for sort of tweaking this BBC English sound that you might be going for is the TU sounds after each other. So similarly to the DU sounds from Duke and during, we've got the TU sound in words like tuna instead of tuna, what we would say.
Or Tuesday instead of Tuesday.
Or I'm getting on the tube instead of I'm getting on the tube.
Or I'm watching YouTube. You should say, I'm watching YouTube.
I'm watching YouTube.
Which sounds so weird to us, obviously.
And it almost sounds American, like really, I'm watching YouTube.
And that's probably quite important. That's how it differs to American. If you really listen, they would say YouTube, but we would say tube. So we've got a slight, it's called a diphthong, where you go from one sound to the other, tube instead of tube.
It's like you're dipping. You're actually dipping.
Yeah.
In your tongue.
Yeah. In your tongue. So instead of tube, it's tube.
Thank you, linguistics expert Joel.
Clapping myself.
Claps
I've got a
Joel.
cough. I'm sorry. I've been coughing all the way through this. Thank you.
You're welcome. He doesn't like to be touched.
You're fine.
Oh, this video isn't saying that you should speak like this. It's simply to help you learn a BBC accent if you're perhaps going for an acting role or you're just trying to learn it out of interest.
Yeah.
This is how some people still speak.
And it's useful for you to get some context in how British English was pronounced back in the day
To how it is now.
to how it is now. It's just good to get that little bit of history, I think.
People are still talking about this because very recently in the news, a guy who works on a mainstream show, he works for the BBC, he announces the lottery. So in September of this year, it kicked off. People were phoning up and complaining about a guy who works on mainstream television because he pronounces the TH sound F. So he replaces words like thunderball instead of thunderball. And
Or free instead of three.
yeah, free. And people were phoning up and complaining, and radio stations were talking about this, and there was an article in The Guardian where he sort of told his story. We'll link it in the description. It's really interesting to read that there's people out there which are called prescriptivists who still care that people who are on television don't speak the way they used to 50 years ago.
Yeah, it's just silly. It's just really stupid. Most people are like us, which are called descriptivists, where we just think there's no right or wrong way. Right or wrong way? There's no right or wrong way to speak.
There's no right or wrong way.
Descriptivists think that there is no right or wrong way to speak. The way that everyone speaks is perfectly valid, and we are just describing the way that people speak, which is what we do on our channel.
Yeah.
Whereas prescriptivists will say, that is wrong, this is the right way.
And it's just totally stupid.
It is. It's only a very small proportion, and again, it tends to be older people.
I just noticed the word stupid. I just said stupid. That's another one. In BBC English would be stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid. So TU in like tuna and tube. Stupid. So you've got to just sort of accept it. This is the way the older generation usually tend to be. And this association comes with the sort of like people that are on television have gone to a private school, have been educated in, say, Eton or Cambridge, Oxford, but it's not true. There's so much diversity now in the UK on TV, on mainstream media. There's no correct way to be. This is just what's
definitely
what's happening.
Because I think we said it at the beginning, but just to reiterate, people used to only be able to get a job with the BBC if they had the BBC English accent. Whereas now you get people with all sorts of regional accents on the BBC. So it's just not a thing anymore. It's just a silly attitude to have.
And it will probably work in your favour if you don't have a BBC accent,
Yeah.
because they're trying to move away from that old school mentality and just bring other people onto the platform, whether it's the way you speak or the way you look. So diversity
is king.
Is king.
Yeah.
You've got to tick that diversity box. Tick that ethnic box.
Great. Greek.
Did I mention
Tick.
I'm Greek? Give me a job. Give us a job.
Yes.
Connected to a Greek.
Exactly. I'm connected to. I'm a male and white, so it's not really
And RP.
an RP. Not
so,
really diverse.
fingers
but
crossed for Joel Lia, everyone.
Anyway, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give us a thumbs up.
And if you did find it useful, if you're working on a BBC English accent, let us know if you found it useful in the comments.
Yep, and don't forget to follow our social media as well. We're at Joel Lia on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook.
On all of it. Take care. See
Bye.
you guys. Bye.